Chapter 1190. His words woke her up from her daze. Jianghu originally wanted to fight for a chance to go out, even if it was just to show her face in front of Rong Xiu, to let him know that she was willing to sacrifice everything for him. But now that Elder Bo Yen had spoken, she suddenly realized how stupid she was to say such words in front of everyone. I didn't mean that. She was a little flustered and hurriedly explained. I'm just worried about Senior Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's talent and ability is the best in Lingxiao College, and now he is the holy son of Yuntian Tower. Don't tell me that his ability to protect himself is not as good as yours, and you need to worry about him? Elder Bo Yan's tone was calm, but his words made Jiang Ji-won even more embarrassed. The square was silent. Everyone's gaze towards Jiang Ji-won also became complicated. That's right. Elder Bo Yan's words were not without reason. The situation outside was indeed dangerous, but many of the elders in the Lingxiao College had already been mobilized, and they could not allow those people to behave atrociously in the Lingxiao College. Furthermore, Rong Xiu himself was the first on the Green Cloud Roll of Honor, and she was only a demigod. What was the use of worrying here? Even if she went, she would only be adding to the trouble and become a burden to everyone. Since that was the case, then her words were exceptionally. Someone wants to put on a show of being infatuated in front of everyone, but she has to see if she has the qualifications and ability. Someone from the crowd sneered. Jiang Ji-won's face instantly turned red and white. She quickly raised her head to look, trying to identify who said that. But there were many people in the square, and the voice was unfamiliar, so she could not recognize who said that. She bit her lips tightly, her face full of grievance. In the past, when she showed such an expression, she would receive a lot of love and sympathy. But this time, it did not seem to be of any use. When the Lingxiao College was in trouble, everyone's first thought was the Lingxiao College and not her. Jiang Ji-won's actions were obviously for her own benefit, so everyone did not think much of it and even felt disgusted. Exactly. Elder Bo Yen had already told everyone to go back and wait patiently, but she insisted on going. What could she do there? Was he sending himself to death? I think she thinks too highly of herself, doesn't she? She was worried about senior brother Rong Xiu. What was her status? Actually, I'm also very worried about senior Rong Xiu. However, I know what I'm capable of. I won't cause trouble for senior brother and the elders at this time. The mocking words were like steel needles piercing into Jiang Ji-won's heart, tearing her self-esteem and face to shreds. He threw them on the ground and trampled on them. She had always been favored by the heavens. No matter where she was always the most pampered and proud existence among the crowd. But now, those people looked at her as if they were looking at a joke. Jiang Ji-won's limbs felt weak. She couldn't understand. She had only said a few words and didn't do anything wrong. Why did it suddenly become like this? Elder Bo Yen looked at her pale face and her dispirited look and shook his head. I heard from your master that you're about to break through. Cultivate well in this period of time. These words gave Jiang Ji-won a way out. She bit her lips and forced herself to reply, then quickly turned and left. That proud head that was always held high finally drooped down at this moment, and the figure of his back revealed a bit of panic and embarrassment. Liang Xiaoxiao and the others exchanged glances with each other. Their faces were filled with awkwardness, and they quickly left together. After this brief interlude, many people in the square felt a little more relaxed. Seeing Elder Bo Yan's meaning, there shouldn't be any problems. Hence, under Elder Bo Yan's urging, the gathered students quickly dispersed. Let's go back first. Zhuxing moved his arms. Sure, I didn't quite understand what Master taught me just now. Why don't you spar with me later and help me sort it out? Although his current realm was slightly higher than Luo Shishir's, in reality, Luo Shishir's talent as a martial artist was more outstanding than his. Zhuxing already knew this, so he often patiently asked Luo Shishir for advice. Luo Shishir nodded. Luo Yenming thought for a while and said, then I'll go back and comprehend the Xian formation first. Although they had just arrived at the academy, they also felt the great pressure of competition here. So even if they were talented and had a good foundation, they didn't dare to relax at all. Chu Yu, what about you? The few of them looked at Chu Liyue. She smiled. Since you're all going back, I'll naturally go back too. The group of people dispersed. Chu Luiwei walked a distance towards the celestial physician, but in the end, she didn't go up the mountain. At this time, the sky was getting dark and the sun was setting in the west. She chose an extremely secluded spot. After confirming that there was no one around, she raised her wrist. On her snow-white wrist, a peach blossom quietly bloomed. With a thought, her figure quickly disappeared from the spot. Relying on teleportation, Chu Luiwei silently arrived at the edge of the academy's barrier. Probably because the academy's elders had increased their vigilance, the barrier was faintly glowing, and it was full of pressure. She held her breath and stared at the barrier. Many thoughts flashed through her mind. Elder Bo Yen was right. Fong State City was just outside the academy, and no one dared to behave atrociously here. The elders had already moved together, and it shouldn't be a problem to deal with those people. Moreover, Rong Xiu was indeed powerful. Chu Luiwei had known Rong Xiu for so long, but until now, she still wasn't sure what realm Rong Xiu had reached. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any problems. Chu Luiwei pursed her lips, and her heart was in a fierce struggle. If she went, she might become a useless burden like Jianghu. If that was the case, she might as well wait here peacefully. Moreover, the academy's barrier was heavily guarded. It was almost impossible for her to sneak out without attracting anyone's attention. After thinking about it, Chu Luiwei turned around and prepared to go back. However, just as she moved, a wave suddenly came from her dantung. The wave didn't come from the water droplet, but from the Black Pyramid. An extremely faint golden light seeped out from the 3 cracks. At this moment, for some reason, the black seal actually showed signs of loosening. This was... Chu Luiwei's eyes narrowed. Just as she was thinking about what this meant, a silver light suddenly flashed in front of her. She focused her eyes and saw that the dagger that Rong Xiu gave her suddenly flew out by itself. Buzz. The dagger vibrated. The sharp edge of the blade shone with a cold light. Murderous aura overflowed. Chu Luiwei's heart suddenly jumped. Rong Xiu, danger! Without thinking, she immediately turned around and ran toward the barrier. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1191. Chu Luiwei grabbed the dagger and held it tightly in her palm. As such, she could feel the violent tremors even more clearly. Chu Luiwei's heart also seemed to be beating faster, as if it was going to jump out of her chest. She quickened her pace and soon felt the pressure from the barrier. The closer she got, the heavier it felt. She was at the foot of a mountain. There were a few huge rocks piled up beside her, and she quickly hid behind them. Because the sky had darkened and this place was desolate to begin with, not many people came and went, so no one noticed her. However, Chu Luiwei did not dare to relax. She thought that she knew that the difficulty she had to overcome was not this, but the huge barrier in front of her. What method did he have to use to open the barrier without making a sound? Chu Luiwei frowned. Suddenly, a white light flashed in her mind. That's it. Previously, when she first entered the academy and stood outside the barrier, some vague memory fragments flashed through her mind. She did not know who set up a small Xian formation and connected it to the barrier. Then, like a key, it easily opened the barrier. If she could also construct that Xian formation, then, this thought made Chu Luiwei restless. She closed her eyes and began to frantically search through that memory fragment. If she remembered correctly, that Xian formation did not seem to be particularly difficult. With her current strength, she might be able to succeed if she put in some effort. However, at that time, the scene had only flashed past her eyes. She hadn't even realized anything before the scene had completely disappeared. Therefore, she only had a vague impression. She did not remember what that Xian formation looked like. And now, what she needed to do was to recall the Xian formation in its entirety and in its entirety. This was easy to say, but when it came to doing it, it was full of difficulties. Her memory was mostly missing, so even she did not know when that memory belonged to, and did not know what happened before and after that. This made it even more difficult for her to recall. She wanted to pick up that vague memory fragment now, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Her surroundings were quiet, and a gentle breeze blew past, blowing the hair on her forehead. She could clearly hear the sound of her heart beating. Countless images flashed through his mind. At this moment, time became extremely difficult to endure. Finally, she recalled the fragment and began to search for the details in her mind. In the blurry image, there was still a pair of fair and slender hands. That pair of hands lightly waved in the air, and several streams of light danced, quickly forming a profound formation. In Chu Liyue's eyes, that small Xian formation was actually just a blurry ball of light. She did not give up and patiently watched. The same scene continued to play out. Again and again, over and over again. She even stared at every movement of his hands, not missing a single detail. Finally, the general outline of the profound formation was gradually revealed. She was overjoyed. Originally, she didn't have much hope, but she didn't expect this move to actually work. And it was much faster than she had expected. Gradually, the position of every line on the profound formation was gradually drawn out clearly. This process was actually very strange. It was as if a layer of mist had covered the glass, and nothing could be seen clearly. But when she wiped away the mist bit by bit, everything started to become clear. Everything happened naturally, as if she already knew what the Xian formation was like. Just as this thought surfaced, Chu Liyue's heart suddenly jumped. She almost subconsciously frowned and denied this guess. The reason why she could do it so smoothly was probably because she was a level 9 Xian master in the past, and her comprehension of profound formations had always been very strong. It was normal for her to occasionally master it. Chu Liyue didn't pay too much attention to this matter, and quickly focused all her attention on the profound formation. After a period of time, the last stroke was finally seen clearly. She suddenly opened her eyes. She gently raised her hand and slowly drew in the air. Several streams of light flew out and intertwined in front of her, dazzling and moving. Chu Liyue followed what she had learned before, and followed those steps very strictly, bit by bit. Soon, a rough outline of the profound formation appeared in front of her. But because it was her first time, she wasn't very familiar with many parts, and Chu Liyue's current Xian master rank had yet to recover to level 9, so even though this profound formation was barely outlined, it was still a little rough. But Chu Liyue was already very satisfied with this. She held her breath and focused, staring at the profound formation, and filled in the remaining lines one by one. As the profound formation continued to be perfected, the pressure and aura on it also gradually increased. When she solemnly and carefully drew the last stream of light and completed the profound formation, she didn't even dare to breathe loudly. She tried her best to suppress the excitement in her heart, and looked up to the front. The Academy's barrier was only 10 steps away from her. She gently raised her wrist and sent the small profound formation out. At first glance, it looked like a butterfly that was about to take flight, lightly flying over there. It danced lightly in the air. Chu Liyue held her breath. Thump, thump. Her heart seemed to be tightly clenched by something. It was beating intensely, and the sound was incomparably clear. This short distance actually seemed to be exceptionally long at this moment. Finally, the profound formation flew to the front of the barrier. It was like a thin piece of paper that was gently attached to the barrier. This was the moment. Chu Liyue suddenly felt that there seemed to be some kind of subtle connection between herself and the barrier. This feeling was not unfamiliar. She pursed her lips and walked forward, landing soundlessly. As she approached, the pressure and power on her body also became more and more terrifying. When she stood in front of it, even her bones faintly hurt. But Chu Liyue didn't have the heart to care about this at this moment. She stretched out her hand according to the image in her mind. An extremely soft sound was heard. The huge barrier slowly split open from the middle. This movement was extremely small, and even the barrier beside it wasn't affected at all. It was still as calm as before. Chu Liyue raised her leg and stepped out. Boom! Chu Liyue had just walked out of the barrier when she heard a loud sound coming from afar. She suddenly raised her head, and her expression was immediately shocked as her pupils shrank. In the sky far away, hundreds of people were fighting. The sound just now came from there. Forces of various colors flew and collided wildly. It was extremely chaotic, but Chu Luiyue still saw Rong Xiu at a glance. At this moment, he seemed to be surrounded and attacked by a group of people. His snow-white brocade robe was already stained with several messy bloodstains. And those people had no intention of letting him go. A sharp arrow suddenly pierced through the air. It went straight for Rong Xiu's back. The peach blossom on Chu Luiyue's wrist bloomed enchantingly. The force around her surged wildly. In the next moment, her figure suddenly disappeared. Chapter 1192. Rong Xiu felt the cold wind coming from behind him. His eyes turned sharp and golden light surged in his palm. Suddenly, he paused and a rare look of surprise flashed across his face. In that moment of hesitation, the sharp arrow had arrived behind him and was about to pierce through his body. Rong Xiu! Elder Shu Feng and the others were shocked when they saw this scene from afar. Their eyes widened, and their faces were filled with shock as they cried out in a deep voice. "Get out of the way! How could Rong Xiu be distracted at a time like this?" Jin Lei sneered. The corners of his mouth curled up and his eyes were full of mockery. He was almost sure that he would win. Rong Xiu was very good at fighting. Previously, they had besieged him, but they did not gain any advantage over him. But so what? At this critical moment, there was no room for absent-mindedness or hesitation. The slightest mistake could lead to extremely serious consequences. However, just when he thought that he could wait for Rong Xiu to be injured and defeated, a slender figure suddenly appeared behind Rong Xiu. That person appeared so suddenly that he did not even cause any energy fluctuation. He was already there. Teleportation. When Jin Lei and the others saw this scene, they all had the same thought in their minds. Those who could teleport were at least great deities. However, they had already surrounded Rong Xiu. The elders outside had tried several times but failed to break in. How could this person... A crisp and powerful sound of collision was heard. That person was holding a black sword and had blocked the sharp arrow. Swish. That person raised his wrist slightly and the sharp arrow was deflected. It brushed against the black sword. The sound was ear-piercing. But soon after, that person's black sword quickly slashed down, directly cutting the arrow in half. Everything happened in an instant. Who is that? Jin Lei and the others tensed up and looked over. However, when they saw that person's face, they were all stunned. That was a young man? It was indeed a young man. He wore a light green brocade robe, and his figure was slender and tall. His appearance was delicate and pretty, and there was a hint of youthfulness on his face. He definitely didn't look more than 20 years old. That was a child who didn't seem to be on the same level as them. But at this moment, with the black sword in his hand, he suddenly and swiftly broke through their blockade and appeared behind Rong Xiu, blocking the arrow for him. Almost instantly, everyone understood. He had used some kind of yuan tool that could teleport. There was a moment of silence in the chaotic scene. Chu Luiyue held her sword with both hands. That arrow almost made her hand go numb. If she hadn't been cultivating with Debao all this time and greatly improved her physical strength, she definitely wouldn't have been able to block that move. She could feel countless pairs of incomparably sharp eyes around her, which were like blades scraping her body. "Who are you?" Jin Lei shouted in a deep voice. He subconsciously wanted to see what realm this person was in, but he was surprised to find that the other party had concealed his aura extremely well. Even he couldn't pry into the young man's true strength. However, to be able to block that arrow, he seemed to be at least a rank 9 martial artist. Facing such a young face, it was really impossible to associate him with a god-level expert. Chu Luiyue turned a deaf ear to his words and only turned her head to look at Rong Xiu. Their gazes met. The surprise and astonishment in Rong Xiu's eyes had all dissipated, leaving only a heavy and indiscernible darkness. Between the ripples, there seemed to be an undercurrent surging. Just this one glance was enough. Chu Luiyue heaved a sigh of relief. His complexion and aura looked good, so he shouldn't be too seriously injured. And he seemed to be quite at ease. Her gaze quickly swept past the messy bloodstains on his clothes. Most of them shouldn't belong to him. This made her heart finally calm down, but at the same time, a thought flashed through her mind. Rong Xiu's strength was indeed stronger than she had expected. This man, Chu Yu? Just as the people here fell into a strange silence, the few elders in the distance finally saw Chu Liuyue's face clearly and couldn't help but be shocked. Elder Wan Zheng was the most shocked. His face, which had always remained calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, was now filled with shock. After the shock, it was anger. Why are you here? Didn't this kid say that he was going back? Why did he suddenly appear here? And he directly rushed to the center of the group of people who were besieging him. Did he think that he had lived too long? Chu Luiyue wanted to explain, but the surrounding people were staring at her covetously, so she didn't have the chance to speak. Chu Yu? Jean Lei's dark eyes swept across Chu Luiyue and sneered. Looks like you're also a student of Lingxiao College? He quickly ran through his mind. Among the first-rate families in the Divine Ruins world, there was no one with the surname Chu. This made him even more unscrupulous, and he didn't take Chu Luiyue seriously at all. Today, he had even offended the Yuntian Tower and so on. Why would he be afraid of such a small thing? You're quite bold at such a young age. Chu Luiyue gripped the long yuan sword in her hand tightly, but her expression didn't seem to be nervous. Hearing this, she even laughed. Everyone praises me like that. Jean Lei's eyelids twitched violently, and his expression quickly turned cold. Looks like the elders of your college really don't know how to teach people. Didn't anyone tell you that there are some people you can't afford to offend? Chu Luiyue blinked, then looked at Rong Xiu and asked with incomparable sincerity. Senior brother Rong Xiu, are they all people I can't afford to offend? When she said, Senior brother Rong Xiu, her voice was clear and gentle, and she slightly dragged the last syllable. Listening to it, it was like a feather gently tickling one's heart, making one's heart itch. Looking at her clever and cunning eyes, as well as the witty smile on her lips, Rong Xiu raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly, and his eyes darkened slightly. Her character really hadn't changed. If it weren't for the fact that there were still so many people here, he calmly suppressed the desire in his heart, and his thin lips curved into a perfect arc. Of course not. His voice was deep and magnetic, and every word seemed to be whispering softly beside one's ear, making one unconsciously sink into it. You can provoke me however you want. The conversation between the two of them was ambiguous, but to the others, it sounded a little ungrateful and even arrogant. Jean Lei laughed as if he had heard a joke. Ha! He raised the axe in his hand and pointed it directly at the two of them. Everyone, there's not much time left. A piercingly dangerous murderous intent suddenly erupted from his body. When the elders in the distance saw this scene, their hearts pounded violently. Elder Wan Zheng anxiously prepared to step forward, but Rong Xiu suddenly glanced over. There was a hint of a smile on his incomparably noble face. Elders, don't worry. With me around, I will definitely protect her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1193. Elder Wan Zheng and the others were stunned. Jean Lei and the others had already made their move. Almost at the same time, the elders of the academy followed closely behind them. Quite a number of people were stopped. After all, there were many elders from the academy now. In terms of numbers, both sides were basically equal. However, there were still a few people who were faster. They surrounded Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiu suddenly took a step forward and patted Chu Liuyue's shoulder lightly. Just stay here. Leave the rest to me. Chu Luiyue felt her shoulders sink. Then, something slid down her shoulder quietly. She opened her hand and quickly put that thing into her universe ring. She looked up at Rong Xiu. The two of them looked at each other and understood each other's intentions. She nodded without batting an eyelid. Senior brother, be careful. Rong Xiu raised his hand and quickly set up a golden barrier around Chu Luiyue. Then he moved and stood in front of Chu Luiyue. I'm your opponent. He raised his chin slightly. His expression was calm, but there was a noble arrogance in his bones. Come at me together. Rong Xiu's words completely infuriated the few of them. arrogant. In recent years, Rong Xiu was indeed famous as the holy son of the Yuntian Tower. It was rumored that his birth mother secretly married someone from outside the world of God and gave birth to him. A few years after he was born, he was found by the people of the Yuntian Tower and found. At first, the Yuntian Tower planned to execute him directly. After all, this kind of thing was a great stain on the reputation of any first-rate family in the world of God. However, the Yuntian Tower kept him alive in the end. It was all because of his amazing talent. Later, not only did he survive in the Yuntian Tower, he even became the Holy Sun in one fell swoop. It was rumored that this person was cruel and ruthless. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gained so much power and control over the Yuntian Tower in just a few years while the Yuntian Tower's patriarch was in seclusion. Therefore, Jin Lei and the others did not underestimate Rong Xiu from the very beginning. But now, when they heard his words, they still felt that it was ridiculous. After the fight just now, they had a rough idea of Rong Xiu's strength. It was normal for him to be able to hold on for a while, but it was impossible for him to challenge so many of them at the same time. Jin Lei was the first to attack. The others were not willing to fall behind, afraid that the treasure would be snatched away by Jin Lei, so they followed closely behind. Rong Xiu hovered in the air and raised his arm. A ball of golden light quickly appeared in his palm. At the same time, his aura began to surge wildly. With him as the center, a shocking pressure frantically spread out in all directions. Jin Lei's heart skipped a beat, suddenly feeling a little uneasy. After the tough fight just now, Rong Xiu's strength should have weakened, but why did it seem like there was no change from before? At this moment, Rong Xiu looked up. 2 clusters of golden flames flashed in the depths of his deep eyes. Jin Lei suddenly realized something, and a look of shock flashed across his face. How did you refine a god? Boom! He did not have time to finish his sentence. Rong Xiu waved his wrist lightly, and the ball of golden light quietly flew out. It was only the size of a fist, and it seemed to be wrapped in a layer of transparent glass. Inside, it was filled with a rich golden light. When it streaked across the air, it miraculously did not cause any energy waves. It looked very ordinary, and it slowly floated forward. But a look of horror flashed across Jin Lei's eyes, and he quickly retreated. This Rong Xiu, he had actually concealed his true strength before. He retreated in a panic, as if the small ball of golden light was something extremely terrifying. But he was fast, but the ball of golden light was faster. Moreover, he quickly realized that the space around him had become thick and heavy. Every move he made was extremely laborious. Why is his godly territory's suppression so strong? The people next to him finally realized that something was wrong, and they all exclaimed in shock. Jin Lei's throat tightened, and the blood in his body almost froze. His mind was in a mess. Rong Xiu was the Yuntian Tower's holy son. According to the rumors, the bloodline power in his body had already awakened, and he had already cultivated the Holy Sun's golden body. The so-called Holy Sun's golden body was also a special divine body. It was a secret technique unique to the Yuntian Tower's Holy Sun. Other cultivators might not be able to cultivate their own divine body even if they became a high god. But the Yuntian Tower was different. Over the years, their Holy Sons had been able to activate their bloodline power and form a Holy Sun golden body at the same time. In other words, they had forged their own divine body. Because of this, the Yuntian Tower's Holy Sun's combat strength was usually extremely strong. But there were advantages and disadvantages to this. Once they cultivated the Holy Sun's golden body, they would not be able to cultivate a more powerful divine body. This was also a huge shackle for them. But just now, he clearly felt that Rong Xiu clearly displayed a divine body suppression that was stronger than the Holy Sun's golden body. He had 2 divine bodies. And the suppression of this godly territory was naturally double. No, it was stronger than double. As these crazy thoughts flashed through Jin Lei's mind, the golden ball of light had already flown 3 steps away from him. Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent, and his eyes were disdainful. His thin lips curled slightly, and he spat out a word. The suppression was heavy, and it was like a divine judgment. Break. Digression. February. What do you think about your man having 2 godly territories? Rong Xiu. Calm smile waiting for praise. Push someone's face away, that's not important. What's important is that from today onwards, the monthly votes will be doubled. What do you think? February. I've already set the date for October's explosive release. The more monthly votes you get, the more explosive it will be. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1194. Following his command, the golden ball of light suddenly exploded. In an instant, golden light flashed. It was as bright as day between heaven and earth. The brilliant light instantly enveloped the surroundings. A powerful god territory descended. Before the few of them could fight Rong Xiu, they were already trapped in this god territory. They instinctively wanted to use their own god territories to fight back, but they quickly realized in horror that in this god territory shrouded in golden light, their strength was severely suppressed, and they could not use their own god territories. In fact, even moving had become extremely difficult. This was truly a situation where they were meat on someone's chopping board. If they could not think of a way to break free as soon as possible, they could only stay here and be attacked by Rong Xiu at will. Jin Lei actually had no intention of fighting with Rong Xiu again. Dual divine domains. Anyone who went up against him would only end up dead. However, even though he tried his best to retreat, it was already too late. This was because the distance between them and Rong Xiu was very close to begin with, and he had charged at the front just now. It was too late for him to retreat now. Compared to the few of them who were stuck in a dilemma, Rong Xiu, who was in the middle, seemed to be exceptionally relaxed. His gaze darkened, and the space in front of him began to collapse inch by inch. It looked like it was about to reach where those few people were. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that if he wanted to, he could directly take their lives now. Not only were Jin Lei and the others shocked, but the people who were fighting in the distance also noticed the commotion and looked over. It was fine if they did not look, but once they did, everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. In fact, even Elder Shu Feng and the others did not know how powerful Rong Xiu was now. Hence, when they saw this scene, the shock in their hearts was no less than Jin Lei and the others. Wasn't Rong Xiu fighting with them just now? How did he suddenly become so strong now? An elder could not help but murmur softly. Elder Shu Feng suppressed the surging waves in his heart. Isn't that obvious? It's obvious that he was hiding his strength. Although they did not know why Rong Xiu had suddenly changed his mind and used his true strength, it was still a good thing for them. This round was a sure win. I admit defeat. When the space collapsed in front of him, Jin Lei finally gave up without hesitation. His face was tense, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. From this, it could be seen that although these words were spoken quickly, they were not done willingly. He wanted that treasure. After all, a king-grade origin tool was extremely rare in the Divine Ruins world. Even a first-rate family would crazily chase after it. But before that, he had to be alive. If he really died here today, then it would be like drawing water with a bamboo basket. In the end, it would all benefit others. Jin Lei had seen many big scenes. Although his temper was irritable and arrogant, he could still bend and stand tall at crucial moments. Rong Xiu, as long as you stop now and let us go, I promise that the Golden Wing sect will never oppose the Yuntian Tower again. Jin Lei saw that the space in front of him was not slowing down, but the pressure on him was getting heavier. He could not help but swallow with difficulty and raise his voice again. I mean what I say. Rong Xiu smiled. Really? Of course. I'm the sect master's direct disciple. In front of so many people, I will definitely do as I say. As Jin Lei spoke, he could already feel the pressure pressing down on him, causing his face to ache faintly. It was as if a sharp knife was constantly scraping his face. Rong Xiu's eyebrows twitched slightly, and he seemed to be smiling. You should have said this earlier. Do you think you still have the right to bargain with me now? Jin Lei's face paled. He could see the killing intent in Rong Xiu's eyes. Rong Xiu really dared to kill him. Jin Lei was finally completely flustered. Rong Xiu, I just want to snatch that treasure. I never had the intention to kill you. If you kill me here today, the Golden Wing sect will not let this matter rest. You want to use the Golden Wing sect to pressure me? Rong Xiu's tone was languid, and his expression was indifferent. If the sect master of the Golden Wing sect was here, I could still give him face. For you. His voice was calm, but it carried the most powerful killing intent. Jin Lei choked. Only then did he remember that although he was highly regarded by the sect master, he was not the person in charge of the Golden Wing sect. On the other hand, Rong Xiu, as the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, was on equal footing with their sect master. Rong Xiu seemed to feel that these words were not enough of a blow to Jin Lei. Besides, even if I'm willing to let you go, the academy will still be in charge. The academy may not be so. Causing trouble in Fangzhou City was the same as causing trouble in Lingxiao College's territory. He originally wanted to end the battle quickly and snatch the treasure back. The sect master would definitely protect him for the sake of the treasure. But now, not only did he not get the treasure, he was also in a quagmire. His life and death were in the hands of the other party. You did it on purpose just now? He suddenly realized something and blurted it out. Rong Xiu had been besieged previously, but there were wins and losses, so the two sides were actually in a state of tug-of-war. They also thought that as long as they continued fighting, they would be able to snatch the treasure back from Rong Xiu. But now that they thought about it, Rong Xiu was just stalling for time. He gave them hope, thinking that the treasure was within their reach. In reality, he was just exhausting their strength and patience, waiting for the elders of Lingxiao College to arrive. Now, he had turned the tables and gained the upper hand. Even if they wanted to leave, it would be difficult for them to escape the siege of so many elders. In an instant, Jin Lei's heart was filled with endless regret. It was all in the heat of the moment. If he had known, he would not have followed them. Rong Xiu smiled slightly, admitting it. You're easier to bait than expected. It must have been hard on the sect master of the Golden Wing sect to nurture you for so many years and entrust you with such an important task. In the end, he was just a brainless person. Jin Lei clenched his fists tightly, and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. His face gradually turned pale, and soon he was covered in cold sweat. It's all his fault for encouraging us. Suddenly, a sharp reprimand came from the side. We wanted to compete fairly with you, but he urged us to join forces. He also urged us to chase after you. That's right. It's him. It's all the Golden Wing sect's fault. It has nothing to do with us. Rong Xiu. Elders. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. This debt should be on Jin Lei's head. In an instant, the other families turned against him, and the situation was reversed. Jin Lei was trembling with anger, and then he laughed bitterly. Good. Since all of you have said so, then I don't have to be polite with you. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly shouted in a low voice. The next moment, he actually forcibly broke free from Rong Xiu's god realm. In an instant, his skin and flesh ruptured. Blood dripped everywhere. He went straight for Chu Luiwei on the other side. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1195. Jin Lei's outburst was extremely sudden. No one expected him to suddenly turn around and charge towards Chu Luiwei while he was still begging for mercy. Moreover, he did it in such a decisive manner. Chu Luiwei realized what he was going to do the moment he charged towards her. She moved her feet and quickly dodged backwards. Probably because she was surrounded by Rong Xiu's enchantment. Although she was also in the divine realm, she was not affected at all and could still move freely. This also gave her a chance to shake off Jin Lei. However, Jin Lei was already a little crazy at this moment. He was on the verge of breaking down. When those people turned against him and pushed all the blame onto him, he knew that he was finished. The matter had already blown up. Lingxiao College needed an explanation. These clans and sects needed to shirk their responsibilities. Even the sect leader of the Golden Wing sect would not be willing to go against the school and Yuntian Tower for him, who had not taken back anything. He knew that he would become a sacrifice for the balance of everything. The situation was set. He had no other choice. Therefore, in his madness, the only way he could think of to protect himself was to kidnap a student from Lingxiao College. It did not matter who the student was or what her identity was. The important thing was that Lingxiao College would definitely not give up on their student in front of so many people. They would definitely give in. These thoughts flashed through Jin Lei's mind in an instant. Therefore, he did not hesitate to make a move. Even if he forcefully broke free from Rong Xiu's divine realm and was heavily injured. But at this moment, he was about to lose his life. Why would he care about that? Black Bone Leopard. He quickly closed in on Chu Luiyue as he shouted. He summoned his own contracted magical beast. To be more precise, it was a contracted magical beast. A vigorous black figure appeared in response to the call. It was a bun that was completely black. Only its eyes were dark green, like ghost fire. It made one's heart turn cold just by looking at it. Its speed was even faster than Jin Lei. In the blink of an eye, it was already behind Chu Luiyue. One man and one beast prepared to launch a pincer attack on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's eyes turned cold. Dumpling. The sound of wings flapping could be heard. A crimson-tailed red phoenix that was crimson all over appeared in everyone's line of sight. It flapped its wings and the flames on its body raged. Everywhere it passed, everything was burned to ashes. Seeing Dumpling, the black bone leopard hesitated for a moment, and a trace of panic flashed across its eyes. In the Divine Ruins world, there were quite a few types of divine beasts. But even if they were all divine beasts, there were still differences in strength. Among the divine beasts, there were two primordial divine beasts, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon and the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. Behind them were the divine beast clans that possessed the power of their bloodlines. Correspondingly, the stronger the bloodline power, the higher the status. Although the black bone leopard was also a divine beast, compared to Dumpling, who possessed the bloodline of the primordial divine beasts, it was still lacking. The reverence for the two primordial divine beasts' bloodlines that were buried deep in its bones and blood made the black bone leopard fearful, and it even faintly wanted to submit. With just this moment of hesitation, Dumpling had already taken the lead to attack. Boom! A ball of red fire flew out. It went straight for the black bone leopard. The black bone leopard hurriedly dodged, but a part of its tail was still burned. Dumpling directly swooped down. Its sharp claws clawed at the black bone leopard's eyes. The two divine beasts quickly engaged in a battle. Jin Lei's expression froze for a moment. He did not expect that such a young and tender youth would actually contract with such a level of divine beast. This Chuyu might not be so easy to deal with. But at this moment, Jin Lei already had no other choice. So he did not stop his footsteps and continued to rush towards Chu Luiyue. At the same time, he used all his strength to withstand the terrifying pressure of the Rong Xiu and forcefully raised his axe. Fiercely chopped down. Crack. A small crack appeared on the golden barrier. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. She quickly retreated while circulating the force in her body. Bang! The barrier shattered. At this moment, the distance between the two of them was extremely close. Jin Lei raised the axe in his hand again and chopped down. The void shook. A tyrannical wave crazily attacked. The Rong Xiu's expression turned fierce, and murderous intent surged in his eyes. However, at this moment, a burst of intense light suddenly erupted from Chu Luiyue's hand. A ball of light shot up into the sky. It's that Emperor Divine Weapon. Suddenly, a cry of surprise came from the crowd. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. Emperor Divine Weapon? So this was what they wanted to snatch? Immediately after, Chu Luiyue saw that wherever the ball of light passed, a faint glow would scatter. The Rong Xiu's golden divine territory actually quietly dissipated. After seeing this clearly, Chu Luiyue's heart tightened, and she suddenly felt that something was wrong. The aura of an Emperor Divine Weapon was actually stronger than the Rong Xiu's divine territory? She looked up. The light on the ball of light was gradually becoming gentler. From here, she could vaguely see that there was something inside. Moreover, as the light flashed on the ball of light, the outline inside became clearer and clearer. More importantly, the aura on the ball of light was also crazily increasing. Jean Lei's axe had just chopped down when the sharp aura was swept away by the invisible wave of the ball of light and disappeared without a sound. Chu Luiwei sucked in a cold breath. This thing, that's not a Emperor Divine weapon. Elder Shu Feng suddenly exclaimed in shock. That's a venerable divine weapon. The moment he said that, everyone was shocked. Everyone, including the many elders of Lingxiao College, firmly believed that the treasure that appeared from Blue Feather's abyss was an Emperor Divine weapon. According to the records of the college, the equipment refiner back then was indeed a king equipment refiner. No one would have thought that the last thing he left behind was a legendary venerable divine weapon. No wonder he died not long after he finished refining it. It was obvious that he had exhausted all his energy and effort for this thing. In the dead silence, Jean Lei was the first to react. The situation of being on the verge of death had stimulated all his potential. He didn't even think about it before he charged upwards. Now, the closest to the venerable divine weapon was Chu Yu, and the second was him. As long as he could surpass that ignorant brat and take the venerable divine weapon for himself, he would definitely be able to turn the situation around. When he thought of this, his eyes became even crazier. He chased after him with all his might. The moment Jean Lei moved, Chu Luiwei moved as well. Rong Xiu did not pass the item to her for her to lose it. If it really fell into the hands of others, she would not be able to bear the blame. However, she quickly discovered a problem. Under the terrifying power of that treasure, she could not teleport. Because of this, her speed was slower than Jean Lei's. In the blink of an eye, Jean Lei had already caught up. The two of them were very close. Jean Lei directly threw the axe in his hand. It chopped toward Chu Luiwei. You want to snatch it from me? Dream on. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1196. At this moment, Chu Luiwei and Jean Lei were the closest to the venerable divine weapon. Who would be able to obtain it had become the focus of everyone's attention. When they saw Jean Lei directly throw his axe at Chu Luiwei, the faces of the elders on the academy's side changed. Chu Yu. Elder Wan Zheng's heart sunk. That kid was only at the middle stage of rank 7. How could he be Jean Lei's match? If he was hit by this attack, he was afraid that the hearts of Elder Wensi and the others were also hanging high in the air. At this moment, no one could make a move. Everything depended on Chu Yu. When Chu Luiwei saw Jean Lei, she knew that he was a god-level expert. He was a god-level expert who had stepped into the god-level realm. His level was much higher than hers. Even she knew that if she were to face such a person head-on, she would only have death waiting for her. However, they were so close to each other, and no one could help her. She had to take this attack on her own. Looking at the ice-cold axe that was flying toward her rapidly, Chu Luiwei did not hesitate at all and used her strongest combat ability. In an instant, a layer of golden armor covered her body. At the same time, a black shield stood in front of her. Jean Lei didn't think much of it and couldn't help but laugh. My axe is a high-level divine weapon, and it's extremely sharp. Do you think you can just take out a shabby shield and clang? The two collided. He didn't manage to finish his sentence. His smug expression quickly turned into astonishment and disbelief, because his axe was actually unable to split open the black shield. Instead, it was bounced back by the intense collision. Swoosh! He quickly dodged. The axe brushed past his face. He had actually cut off half of his ear. In an instant, he felt excruciating pain. His face was covered in blood. Coupled with his already pale face, he looked even more battered and exhausted. That was not all. A strong gust of wind swept past him, and at the same time, it slowed down his speed. The distance between him and Chu Luiwei widened again. You! Jean Lei looked at Chu Luiwei in shock and anger. He covered his ear with one hand and couldn't believe what had just happened. A young man who wasn't even 20 years old withstood his attack and even gained the upper hand. One had to know that in order to ensure that his attack would hit the target, he had used all of his strength. It was a great humiliation. What a joke. Then, the young man's face appeared from behind the black shield. His delicate and clean face was pale, and blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He wasn't completely unaffected by the collision just now. However, in the end, he was still in one piece. Jin Lei couldn't describe how he felt. He looked at the black shield in Chu Liyue's hand. There was something wrong with that thing. Ever since he got the axe, he had been invincible. Invincible. No matter how tough something was, no matter how solid the barrier was, he could easily split it open with his axe. Isn't the barrier that Rong Xiu set up like this? However, such a sharp axe was completely useless in front of the black shield. Jin Lei took a closer look and realized that there wasn't even a mark on it. This was definitely not an ordinary yuan instrument. Chu Liyue sensed the madness in his eyes and immediately became alert. All the muscles in her body tensed up. Her opponent's power was much higher than hers. She almost couldn't take that blow. If she were to do it 2 more times, her arm would probably be crippled first. She made a prompt decision and continued to charge towards the thing above her. Dumpling! She let out a clear shout. A red figure quickly approached her. It was Dumpling, who had just finished off the black bone leopard. There were still a few pieces of flesh on its claws. It had been left behind when it had scratched the black bone leopard's face. Chu Liyue leaped and jumped onto Dumpling's back. Dumpling flapped its wings and its speed suddenly increased. Jin Lei instinctively turned back to take a look. His contracted divine beast, the black bone leopard, was now beyond recognition. Its face and body were badly mutilated, and there were several red flames burning on its body. It was rolling around in pain, trying to extinguish the flames. However, how could the flames of the red-tailed phoenix be extinguished so easily? As if sensing Jin Lei's gaze, the black bone leopard raised its head and looked over. All the coldness and ruthlessness in its eyes had disappeared. Instead, it was full of desire and hope. Now, the only one who could help it was its master. However, Jin Lei forcibly retracted his gaze and chased after Chu Liyue. At this time, he was already a clay bodhisattva crossing the river. He couldn't even protect himself, so how could he care about anything else? The black bone leopard was already crippled and couldn't help him. He could only give it up. Seeing Jin Lei's action, the black bone leopard's only intact eye moved, leaving only mournful despair. It howled. However, Jin Lei turned a deaf ear to it. He mobilized all his strength, hoping to snatch that venerable origin device before Chu Liyue. However, imagination was beautiful, but reality was cruel. He soon realized that after the previous battle, he had used up more than half of his strength. He couldn't catch up to the red-tailed phoenix at all. The distance between the two sides was increasing. This made Jin Lei more and more anxious. If he was unable to seize this final opportunity, then he would probably have to stay here forever. After thinking about it, he gritted his teeth and made a bold decision. Since it was a dead end anyway, he might as well take a risk. Even if he really died, he could drag someone down with him. At this thought, a strange pattern suddenly appeared between his brows. That was the golden wing sex totem. When the totem appeared, the origin power around his body began to boil. It began to rise at an abnormal speed. One of the elders suddenly exclaimed in surprise. "Oh no! He's burning his bloodline power." Of course, the disciples of the Golden Wing sect also had bloodline power. However, their bloodline power was different from that of ordinary aristocratic families. Most of them obtained the corresponding bloodline power through cultivation or other methods. And this was also an important condition for them to settle down in the sect. The stronger the bloodline power, the higher their status, and the greater their right to speak in the sect. At this moment, he activated the totem and burned the bloodline power he had accumulated with great difficulty. It was obvious that he was planning to fight to the death. Chu Yu was in danger. However, as soon as he said that, everyone saw that Rong Xiu had already moved. He took a step forward with his long legs and quickly approached Jin Lei. His face was expressionless, as if covered with a layer of frost, cold to the bone. There was no doubt that he had already made up his mind to kill Jean Lei. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1197. Sensing the cold, murderous intent behind him, Jean Lei turned around instinctively. After glancing at Rong Xiu, he couldn't help but shiver, and a deep sense of fear rose from the bottom of his heart. Why did Rong Xiu suddenly have such a strong murderous intent towards me? They had been fighting for so long, but Rong Xiu's emotions were calm and indifferent. It was as if everything had nothing to do with him. Or perhaps he did not care about those things at all. Even when Rong Xiu attacked with all his might and suppressed all of them, he did not react at all. But now, he had suddenly become like this. Jean Lei really could not understand. The pressing time and the crisis of life and death made him unable to think carefully about this matter. The only thing he could do was to rush toward Chu Luiyue at an even faster speed. Either he could snatch that venerable 1 yuan instrument, or he could kidnap Chu Yu. Chu Luiyue flew upward with Dumpling. At this moment, the venerable 1 instrument had stopped and was quietly suspended in midair. It was still enveloped in a layer of faint light. From where Chu Luiyue was, she could barely see the outline of the object inside. It seemed like it was also a sword. The closer she got, the clearer she could feel the pressure coming from above. Chu Luiyue held her breath. The aura of this sword was several times stronger than the Dragon Abyss sword. The Dragon Abyss sword was personally forged by Taizu. It triggered 81 Tianlei and was considered a high-level divine instrument. Even in the Divine Ruins world, the Dragon Abyss sword was definitely a valuable treasure. After Chu Luiyue came to the academy, she realized that although Taizu was unable to break through to the High God realm and remained at the Demigod realm, he was extremely outstanding in the aspect of weapon forging. However, every time she asked about this, Taizu did not seem to be willing to talk about it. After a few times, Chu Luiyue did not ask anymore. The sword in front of her was a venerable 1 instrument. It was 2 whole levels higher than the Dragon Abyss sword. The degree of its tyranny was self-evident. Girl, this venerable artifact doesn't have an artifact soul. You can take it. Taizu's voice suddenly came from the bottom of his heart. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Artifact soul? That's something that only King Divine artifacts and above have. I'll explain it to you in detail in the future. All you need to do now is to snatch it. The Long Yuan sword was not bad, but compared to this, it was far inferior. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips when he heard Taizu being so excited. Taizu, please enlighten me. The Long Yuan sword has a sword spirit. Although it can't be compared to the sword spirit, with me around, I can lend a helping hand. You just have to find the right time to transfer the sword's soul to that sword. Such an opportunity could be said to be extremely rare. However, Chu Luiyue suddenly hesitated. But, Taizu, this venerable 1 instrument belongs to the academy. It doesn't seem appropriate for me to take it for myself. According to what they had said, the academy had sent out many people and spent a lot of manpower and resources in order to retrieve this item. If she were to do that now, she would feel a little apologetic. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with her. She had only come here because she was worried about Rong Xiu. During the crisis just now, Rong Xiu had handed this item to her without hesitation so that she could take good care of it. But if she took the opportunity in the end to take it for herself, Taizu was stunned for a moment. Then his voice became much calmer. You're right. I was a little impulsive. Just now, when he sensed that this venerable 1 instrument didn't have an artifact soul, he was too excited and didn't think too much. But after listening to Chu Luiyue's words, he thought carefully and felt that it made sense. Although this venerable 1 instrument is extremely rare, but just do as you think. Taizu comforted. It wasn't that he didn't have any regrets. Even he had only heard of the honorable master divine weapon in legends. Now that such a rare treasure was in front of her, Chu Luiyue chose to give it up. With her intelligence, she would know what this meant. You are the pride of the Shangguan family. Taizu sighed with emotion. With such a temperament, what would she have to worry about in the future? Chu Luiyue also smiled. Thank you, Taizu, for your praise. Then I'll take it back first. At this moment, Dumpling had already flown to the side of the light ball. Chu Luiyue jumped down. She didn't know how it came out just now, so Chu Luiyue wanted to try to get it back into the Qianquan ring. However, at this moment, the golden lightning suddenly approached. In an instant, Chu Luiyue's hair stood on end. Countless experiences wandering on the edge of life and death had already forged her instincts. She turned around without any hesitation. Jean Lei's fist, which was burning with the power of bloodline, was already in front of her. Chu Luiyue raised her sword. The divine power in her dantian suddenly surged out. Boom! The long yuan sword suddenly exploded with a powerful aura. The golden lightning shocked Jean Lei. Divine power? Could this young man really be a god-level expert? He didn't have time to think too much and attacked with all his might. The reason why he dared to fight Chu Luiyue with his bare hands was that his fist was already covered with a layer of scales. Although he had yet to completely forge his own divine body, he had already finished forming this hand. In other words, the power of this punch was comparable to a real divine body. Therefore, Jean Lei was very confident. Clang! The long yuan sword and Jean Lei's fist collided. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1198. After a short moment of dead silence, an intense pain came from his hand. The expression on Jean Lei's face instantly froze. The sound of a sharp sword piercing through flesh was heard, making one's teeth ache. Jean Lei could even feel the sharp tip of the sword rubbing against his bones. A trace of panic finally appeared in his eyes, and he quickly retreated. But how could it be so easy to come and go as one wished? Chu Luiyue stared at him coldly, her eyes sharp and cold. At the same time, she held the sword tightly and pushed forward again. Helpless, Jean Lei could only change his fist into a palm and forcefully grab the sword blade. Without any hesitation, another large piece of flesh was scraped off. Fresh blood kept dripping from his hand, flowing down the black blade of the long yuan sword. The intense pain caused his face to turn pale. The next moment, he clenched his teeth, grabbed the long yuan sword, and threw it out fiercely. Although Jean Lei was already at the end of his rope, he was still a god-level expert. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Chu Luiyue used her fastest speed to mobilize the godly power in her body and gave Jean Lei this blow. But in many aspects, she was still inferior to him. For example, Jean Lei, who was in a state of madness, threw Chu Luiyue out of balance in an instant. Her body was thrown to the side. A ray of golden light flew over quickly, and a gentle and strong force supported her, allowing Chu Luiyue to quickly stabilize her body. But at this moment, a soft sound of collision suddenly fell into her ears. Chu Luiyue instinctively turned her head to look. It turned out that after she was thrown out, the long yuan sword that she was holding had accidentally knocked into the ball of light beside her in the process of struggling. The tip of the sword had pierced into the ball of light by about an inch. That sound was produced when the tip of the long yuan sword came into contact with the sword inside. It was crisp, clean, and pleasing to the ear. Just by hearing it, one could tell that it was definitely a peerless sword. If it was any other time, Chu Luiyue would be very happy to hear this sound and see this treasure. It was even better to have a chance to observe it closely. But at this moment, her heart suddenly jumped. The words that Taizu said just now suddenly appeared in her mind. That venerable divine weapon did not have a soul. Chu Luiyue hurriedly tried to pull back the long yuan sword. But when she tried, she realized that the long yuan sword seemed to be sucked onto the sword. It was motionless. At the same time, she could clearly feel that something was gushing out from the long yuan sword and continuously entering the sword. As the long yuan sword's owner, Chu Luiyue knew what it was. Sword soul. The accumulated energy within the long yuan sword began to frantically transfer. This time, Chu Luiyue was really shocked. She did not expect such a mistake. She increased her strength, wanting to take back the long yuan sword. But it was all in vain. The sword in the ball of light was extremely powerful. It was as if he was crazily plundering the long yuan sword. The others did not notice the situation on Chu Liyue's side. Jin Lei saw that Chu Liyue stood there motionless after barely managing to stand. He thought that she had been beaten silly and planned to follow up with another attack. However, as soon as he took a step forward, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He stiffened his neck and looked down. An extremely thin golden line swayed gently in midair. There was a drop of blood on it. It was dark red. Great panic surged in his heart. He turned his gaze and saw that half of his calf had been silently cut off. He didn't even hear the sound of his bones breaking because all of this had happened too quickly. The next moment, that half of his calf suddenly fell under his gaze. He raised his head in horror and saw that Rong Xiu was already not far away from him. It was only because he had focused all his attention on the battle with Chu Liyue that he did not notice. Rong Xiu floated in the air, and his noble face looked as if it was covered in snow. His pair of deep eyes were like a 1,000-year-old lake, and one look was enough to freeze a person. That was a strong murderous intent. He had one hand behind his back and the other hand was wrapped around a golden line. It was the line that had cut off Jin Lei's calf. Jin Lei's face was pale and his cracked lips trembled. Rong Xiu's slender fingers moved slightly. The golden thread instantly transformed into countless sharp blades of light and flew toward the golden lightning. No, Jin Lei sensed danger and was about to beg for mercy when he felt a chill in his throat. A gush of warm blood suddenly spurted out. It was his throat that had been cut off. Jin Lei raised his hand in a panic and wanted to cover the wound on his throat. But halfway through, he realized that his hand had fallen off. Then, it was his forearm and upper arm. Piercing pain came from all over his body. He opened his mouth, but only the sound of the wind could be heard. He knew that his body was gradually disintegrating. He could even feel the blood in his body gushing out, and it was quickly cooling down. Jin Lei widened his eyes and stared fixedly at Rong Xiu. However, his eyeballs exploded the next moment. Annihilation, silent. Countless people were watching this hellish scene, their hearts and minds trembling. The so-called death by 1,000 cuts was nothing more than this. When they looked at Rong Xiu again, many people's state of mind changed. He used such a cruel method to kill him, but his expression was so calm and indifferent. This man was really too scary. But the next moment, they saw an even more shocking scene. The young man standing next to the light ball suddenly fainted. The moment he fell, Rong Xiu went to his side and picked him up by the waist. Digression: those who are fighting for the star of the monthly votes and star of the recommendation votes, please join the group as soon as possible to verify. Currently, the maximum number of monthly votes is 56 times 2. The star of the commentary vote is still pending. There are only 2 days left. Finally, the release time is October 13th at dawn. Raise the monthly votes. Countdown to release. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1199. Chu Liyue seemed to have had a very long dream. In the dream, she seemed to be constantly tugging and fighting with someone. She couldn't see the other person's face or figure clearly. She didn't even know if the person opposing her was a person or not. There was only an extremely tyrannical force that firmly entangled her and pulled her forward. She desperately retreated, wanting to escape, but her body was still uncontrollably dragged forward. Finally, she saw a huge black abyss appear in front of her. She glanced down and knew that she absolutely couldn't go to that place, even though she didn't see anything and didn't know what was hidden inside. But her sharp intuition told her that it was dangerous. Her feet were firmly planted on the ground, and she opened her mouth to shout. But everything was useless. She was like a fish struggling in the desert. Waiting for her was only endless darkness and death. Finally, she was still dragged to the edge of the black abyss. One of her feet had already slipped and stepped on air. No, the room was silent. This murmur was especially clear. Rong Xiu had been sitting by the bed and holding her hand. Seeing that she seemed to be showing signs of waking up, he was slightly relieved. But when he saw her painful and struggling expression, his heart ached again. Her brows were tightly knitted, as if she was enduring great pain, and her mouth was still muttering something. Rong Xiu held her hand tightly, then leaned closer and kissed her forehead. Soon after, he half-hugged her in his arms and let her head rest on his chest. His other hand gently patted her hand, gently and patiently coaxing her. I'm here. Hearing this low voice, Chu Liwei seemed to finally calm down, and her brows gradually relaxed. After a while, she slowly opened her eyes. What entered her eyes was a blur. She closed her eyes and gradually adapted to the surrounding light, then she could see everything in front of her clearly. This was an unfamiliar room. The room was clean and tidy. Although there weren't many things, those that were placed were extremely precious. There was a low-key nobility everywhere. Chu Liwei immediately reacted. This wasn't her residence. Wasn't she outside just now? He's awake. Rong Xiu's voice came from above. Chu Liwei raised his head and looked at him in a daze. Their eyes met. Her eyes were extremely beautiful. In the past, they were always bright and resplendent, flickering with a clever and crafty light. At this moment, it was unknown whether it was because she had experienced too many things, or because she had just woken up and had yet to regain her senses, but her eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist. It was so hazy that she couldn't see clearly, and there was a hint of confusion in her eyes. Rong Xiu, senior martial brother? Chu Liwei looked at him and called out subconsciously. He didn't even forget to add the last two words. Rong Xiu's eyes instantly darkened. They were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. He bent down and kissed her lips. Their breaths touched each other, and their warm breaths spilled out. Even the air seemed to have become ambiguous. Chu Liwei was caught off guard, and before she could react, her territory was already taken over by someone else. She was about to struggle, but Rong Xiu had already grabbed her hand tightly and deepened the kiss. But when Chu Liwei was a little out of breath and wanted to push him away, he restrained himself and let go of her. The man's deep eyes swept across her exceptionally moist lips. He raised his eyebrows and reached out to wipe her lips. His slightly rough fingertips brushed against her soft lips. It was a little rough. His eyes were very dangerous, as if he was suppressing something, but his actions were exceptionally gentle. After a while, he stopped and pinched her chin, raising her face slightly. After looking around carefully, he nodded his head in satisfaction. You shouldn't be able to tell now. Although he wanted to continue, he restrained himself when he thought of the group of people waiting outside. Chu Liwei's eyebrows twitched. At this moment, she had already recalled everything that had happened before she fainted. She remembered that she had been fighting with that man, but he had flung her away. Then, the Long Yuan sword had collided with the venerable artifact, and the sword spirit had also moved inside. And because she could not withstand the pressure produced during the process, she had fainted. After that divine artifact? She widened her eyes slightly and grabbed Rong Xiu's arm. That sword, don't worry, that thing is fine. Rong Xiu knew what she was going to ask, so he immediately gave her an answer. His tone was calm with a hint of his usual laziness, as if he was talking about an extremely ordinary matter. No matter when, he seemed to be so calm and collected. Chu Liwei's mood was also affected by this, and she calmed down a lot. She heaved a sigh of relief. That's good, she thought. That thing, the owner of that thing had once left a notebook in the academy. I'll help you look for it later. Rong Xiu's sudden words stunned Chu Liwei for a moment. What? Owner? Notebook? What did she want that for? Seeing her reaction, Rong Xiu raised his sword-like eyebrows and narrowed his eyes. Chu Liwei's heart suddenly thumped violently. Wait, could it be, you still don't know? Rong Xiu spoke softly with a faint smile. That venerable artifact has already recognized you as its owner. Chu Liwei slowly widened her eyes. For some reason, it lacked a weapon spirit, and the sword spirit of your Long Yuan sword had entered it, causing it to become your origin item. Rong Xiu explained slowly. Logically speaking, the sword spirit of your sword would not be able to suppress that venerable artifact, and the only possibility was that it would be devoured and destroyed. However, for some reason, the sword spirit took the initiative, and in the end, this was also one of the reasons why you fainted. At that moment, the two forces collided, and you could not withstand it, so you fainted. Chu Luiyue heard every word Rong Xiu said clearly, and she understood it very well. However, when strung together, she was a little confused. To be more precise, she was completely stunned by the development of this matter. She really didn't want to take that thing for herself. She had even told Taizu about this matter back then, and she had clearly planned to leave it for the academy. How did it become hers in the end? Rong Xiu gently touched her face. Don't worry, everyone saw the situation clearly at that time. You did not deliberately take it for yourself, but accidentally bumped into it when you were attacked. Also, no one knew that the venerable artifact did not have a weapon spirit. Everything was just a coincidence, and the elders will not blame you. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue finally found her voice. She struggled to ask, Then, where are we now, and where are the elders? Rong Xiu said, Oh, we are now in my residence, and Elder Shu Feng and the others are still waiting in the hall outside. Chu Luiyue's gaze suddenly became strange. So, how did I carried you back? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1200. These few simple words contained too much confidence. Chu Luiyue couldn't accept it for a moment and fell silent for a moment. She had seized the venerable artifact that the academy had painstakingly snatched back. Rong Xiu carried the unconscious her back. Just like that, the two of them stayed in his room, allowing the elders to wait outside. Chu Luiyue rubbed her temples. She felt that there was no need for her to go out anymore. Given the current situation, once she stepped out of that door, she would probably die without a corpse. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. A young man's cautious voice came from outside. Senior brother Rong Xiu, is junior brother Chu Yu awake? Elder Wan Zheng and the others are very worried. They all said that if he hasn't woken up yet, they would like to come in and take a look. Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiu couldn't help but laugh when he saw her pitiful expression. After a moment, he raised his voice slightly and said, Go and tell the elders that she's awake. After a short rest, I'll bring her over. Yes. That person's attitude towards Rong Xiu was also very respectful. After responding softly, he quickly left. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes in despair. Won't I be beaten to death if I go out? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and said indifferently, Who dares? Although he had a smile on his face, his tone was slightly raised, with a faint pressure, domineering and domineering. However, this expression only flashed past for a moment. He got off the bed first and then carried the person on the bed out of the blanket. Do you want to put on your own clothes, or do you want me to help you? In fact, in order to make it easier for Chu Luiyue to rest, he only took off her outer clothes, and her inner clothes were still intact. However, when these words came out of his mouth, there was an inexplicable ambiguity. Chu Luiyue glared at him. You're still in the mood to joke at a time like this? We still don't know how to deal with those elders when we go out later. Rong Xiu kissed her face before reluctantly putting her down. He smiled lightly and said, Don't worry. It seems like you're really worried about what the elders will do to you. How rare. Chu Luiyue had just put on her outer robe and was tidying her hair. She turned to look at him when she heard him. What? Nothing. Rong Xiu's expression was as usual, and his thin lips held a slight smile. Actually, you don't have to worry too much. On one hand, the matter with the venerable artifact was an accident. You didn't do it on purpose. On the other hand, you saved me, so it's only right that I stay and take care of you. With Rong Xiu around, Chu Luiyue felt more at ease. She was actually just thinking about how to deal with the elders' interrogation. After all, there were simply too many things that she had to explain to him. She took a deep breath. Let's go. The hall was silent. Several elders sat in a row. Wei Shiping and the others had already been sent back. Those who were still here were all important figures in Lingxiao College. Even Elder Bo Yen, who was not involved in the matter outside, was here. No one spoke. Everyone's expressions were different, but they were all rather complicated. From time to time, Some people would look at Elder Wanzheng who was sitting in front. Elder Wanzheng could only pretend that he did not see them. In fact, he was not in the mood to care about what these people thought. His mind was filled with the scenes from before. He thought that he had taken in a genius disciple and was very proud of it. But it was only now that he realized that this disciple of his was too good at hiding. Also, he was too good at causing trouble. Now, even he did not know how to exonerate that brat. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the door. Everyone in the hall immediately raised their heads in unison to look at him. Two figures could be seen walking over, one in front and one behind. The one walking in front was Rong Xiu, who had changed his clothes. And one step behind him was Chu Luiwei, whom everyone was waiting for. The two of them walked into the hall. Countless pairs of eyes fell on them. To be precise, they were all looking at Chu Luiwei. In fact, when Rong Xiu appeared in the school, he would be the center of attention. Situations like this, where he appeared with others but was ignored by everyone, were extremely rare. Even if Chu Luiwei lowered her eyes slightly, she could still feel those solid gazes on her, making her feel uneasy. Rong Xiu greets the elders. Sorry to keep you waiting. Rong Xiu bowed politely and calmly. Chu Luiwei followed. Student Chu Yu greets the elders. For a moment, no one spoke. Chu Luiwei felt that the situation was getting worse. Fortunately, Elder Bo Yen was the first to speak. Rong Xiu, take a seat first. Rong Xiu shook his head and smiled. With the elders here, Rong Xiu does not dare to sit together. Rong Xiu declined, and Elder Bo Yen did not continue to persuade him. Anyway, his personality had always been like this. He would do whatever he wanted and would not do. He would only listen to his own thoughts. No matter what others said, it was useless. Therefore, Elder Bo Yen turned his gaze to Chu Luiwei. This was the first time he looked at this new student at such a close distance. Although he had a deep impression of this student before, he did not take a closer look. But today he had to take a good look. In fact, he was not unfamiliar with the name Chu Yu. From successfully passing the examination at the beginning of the month and becoming Wanzheng's disciple, to being imprisoned in Min Mountain after entering the school for a day. Any one of them would leave a deep impression on people. Moreover, such a big incident happened today. Chu Yu. Elder Bo Yen stroked his beard, but his expression was still calm. Are you feeling better? Chu Luiwei quickly replied. I am much better. Thank you for your concern, Elder Bo Yen. Suddenly, a cold sneer came from the side. Do you really think I am concerned about you? If not for the fact that you took the venerable divine weapon, Guan He. Elder Bo Yen raised his voice slightly and looked at him with a warning look. Elder Guan He was so angry that he snorted and turned his head away. Am I wrong? The people of the school planned for months and gathered forces from all sides. It was not easy for us to wait for that item to appear and bring it back. But before he could even enter the academy, it had already become his. No matter what, we have to make him give us an explanation. His words did not hide the blame for Chu Luiwei. Elder Bo Yen frowned and was about to say something when Rong Xiu spoke first. Elder Guan He, you are wrong. It was not easy to get that venerable divine weapon, and it is also not bad that it became junior brother Chu Ning's. But you can't blame her for this. Elder Guan He's expression changed. Rong Xiu, are you trying to absolve her? In order to bring that item back safely, you suffered a lot, but in the end, after all, the item had always been with Rong Xiu and he was the one who was attacked. He was one of the few people who had the most right to speak. Rong Xiu smiled. I am not trying to absolve her. What I said is the truth. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1201. At that time, there were a few elders present. I believe everyone saw clearly that Chu Yu only wanted to snatch the item back and prevent it from falling into Jean Lei's hands. He didn't mean to take it for himself. If Jean Lei didn't counterattack and Chu Yu accidentally bumped into it, the incident wouldn't have happened. Rong Xiu's tone was calm and relatively objective. After that, he received the approval of a few elders. That's right. The situation at that time was indeed like that. I can also prove that the child didn't do it on purpose. Elder Guanhe frowned and retorted. You can't just look at the surface. After all, that's a venerable artifact. For this item, those people from the Golden Wing sect didn't hesitate to follow it all the way to Fangzhou City. Who knows if someone would take advantage of the situation to get it? Elder Wanzheng finally couldn't hold back and asked. Guanhe, what do you mean? Everyone knows what I mean. Chu Yu, you know best why things turned out this way, right? Elder Guanhe didn't believe Rong Xiu's explanation at all. Although this news was kept under wraps at first, many people in the academy knew about it after it spread to Fangzhou City. Elder Bo Yen can testify to this, right? Elder Bo Yen paused. At that time, some people might have heard the news by accident. However, this can't be used as evidence to accuse this child. If it wasn't for the benefits, why would he take such a risk? In my opinion, he had planned this long ago. Otherwise, why would he appear next to Rong Xiu directly? How could it be so coincidental that the venerable artifact didn't have a soul, and his sword's soul took the opportunity to occupy it? Everyone fell silent again. Even Elder Wanzheng's lips moved, but he couldn't say anything. Putting the first part aside, the latter part was indeed too coincidental. It was inevitable that this would make people suspicious. Rong Xiu suddenly said, Elder Guanhe, do you know Jin Lei's realm? Elder Guanhe was stunned. He didn't go outside at that time, nor did he fight with those people. However, he more or less heard some of it, so he understood. Supreme God. Rong Xiu nodded. Not bad. His true realm was indeed this. Moreover, he has already cultivated half a divine body. No one was shocked by this. It was normal for cultivators who had broken through to become high gods to want to condense their divine body as soon as possible. In that case, do you know what level Junior Chu Yu is at now? Guanhe was stunned for a moment before he said impatiently, He's just a new student, not my disciple. How would I know? Rong Xiu looked at Elder Wanzheng. Elder Wanzheng, you are her master. You should know her the best, right? Elder Wanzheng hesitated. Middle stage 7th step. Impossible. Elder Guanhe immediately retorted. He clearly displayed his divine power at that time. How could he only be at the middle stage of the 7th step? This was something that he had heard from a few elders. It was definitely not fake. Chu Yu is indeed at this level. The one who spoke was not Wanzheng, but Elder Wenxi. He had a rare look of seriousness on his face as he said word by word, I personally conducted the entrance test for him some time ago. At that time, he was only at the early stage of the 7th step. He should have just broken through to the middle stage of the 7th step. I can guarantee with my reputation that what I said is true. Elder Guanhe was speechless for a moment. Since Elder Wenxi said so, it was basically true. Then what's with the divine power? Everyone looked at Chu Luiwei in unison. Finally, he had a chance to speak. Chu Luiwei sighed in his heart and explained that divine power was obtained by this student from a certain senior in the past. Of course, he could not say that he snatched it. The hall fell silent again for a moment. The elders looked at each other. This reason seemed to make sense. After all, Elder Wenxi and Elder Wanzheng did not have to lie about this kind of thing for a student. That venerable divine artifact did not have a soul, which was unexpected. Elder Shu Feng suddenly said, Even we, who witnessed its birth with our own eyes and tried our best to bring it back, did not notice anything amiss during the process. If even we don't know, then Chu Yu, who has been staying in the academy, should not know. I don't think it's possible that he deliberately planned it. Moreover, I've seen his sword, it's a high-level divine artifact. Logically speaking, the sword's soul stored in it could not successfully occupy a venerable divine artifact. But all of this still happened. In my opinion, maybe, this child is fated with that thing. Elder Shu Feng was very open-minded. Actually, we've put in a lot of effort this time just to invite it back to the academy, and not to let it wander outside. Although it belongs to Chu Yu now, he is a student of the academy, so it can be considered as returning to the academy. From a certain point of view, this is also an inheritance of that senior, which is not a bad thing. What do you think? His words were reasonable and well-founded, causing many people to nod their heads in agreement. Anyway, that thing had already recognized its master. Unless Chu Yu's soul was destroyed, that thing would return to its ownerless state. But they could not kill Chu Yu, right? After all, he was a student of the academy. Moreover, his talent and other aspects were outstanding. More importantly, he wasn't completely wrong this time. At the very least, he helped Rong Xiu. Just this point alone was already very rare. Elder Guan He's expression changed, and in the end he only snorted coldly, but did not say anything else. Elder Bo Yen looked over with a much gentler expression. Chu Yu, you don't have to worry. Since this matter has already happened, then everyone should accept it calmly. However, from now on, you must work hard in your cultivation, and not ruin the reputation of the academy and that senior. Does this mean he doesn't intend to pursue the matter anymore? Chu Liwei was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Thank you for your advice, Elder. This student will definitely keep it in mind." She originally thought that this matter would be difficult to handle, but perhaps because of the support of Rong Xiu, Elder Wan Zheng, and the others, it was resolved relatively smoothly. As for the matter of Rong Xiu carrying her back and spending time with her for a long time, the elders did not ask much. Chu Liwei thought for a moment. Perhaps it was because this matter was not worth mentioning compared to the venerable artifact, so not many people cared. However, just as she was about to heave a sigh of relief, a voice came from the side, causing Chu Liu's heart to jump. Chu Yu. The one who spoke was Elder Huafeng. Ever since Chu Liu came in, he had been looking at her silently, and only now did he speak in a deep voice. He sat up straight and looked into Chu Liu's eyes, as if he wanted to see through all her thoughts. He asked word by word, "How did you pass through the academy's barrier without anyone noticing?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1202. As soon as he said this, the entire hall fell silent. In fact, many people did not realize this problem before because their attention was focused on the Venerable One artifact. At this moment, when they heard Elder Huafeng's question, they suddenly came back to their senses. That's right. This was indeed an extremely important question. The Academy's barrier had always been heavily guarded, especially today. After knowing that the people from the Golden Wing sect had chased after Fang Zhou, the Academy sent several elders to reinforce them and strengthened the barrier's security. No one was allowed to enter or exit the barrier at will. But Chu Yu had inexplicably come out. For a moment, everyone in the hall looked at Chu Liu. Their gazes were different, but they were all filled with suspicion and scrutiny. The atmosphere was stagnant, as if even the surrounding air had frozen inch by inch. Elder Huafeng stared at her. The elders guarding the barrier said that they didn't notice any abnormal fluctuations at that time. One had to know that all the students in the academy had to report to the academy when they entered or exited the barrier. If they didn't report, the black jade token on their bodies would also send out a warning when they tried to pass through the barrier and leave evidence. Chu Yu didn't. It was as if he had suddenly appeared outside the barrier, and he had directly penetrated the layers of obstacles and rushed to Rong Xiu's side. If he was a high god expert, all of this could be explained. But he was only at the middle of the 7th stage. The Academy's barrier has always been opened without causing any commotion by the elders who are in charge of guarding it. And you, how did you do it? A new student who had just entered the Academy for less than a month had such a method. How could it not be suspicious? Chu Liu's body tensed up, and her eyes drooped slightly. She looked at the ground in front of her, but her mind was spinning crazily. At first, when she was about to go out, she was only worried about Rong Xiu, so she didn't think too much about it. After waking up, she knew that this matter would definitely be dragged out by the elders for careful interrogation. Part of the worry in her heart came from this. How could she explain this? Could it be that she had learned it from her incomplete memories? That would be even more difficult to explain. She used to be a student of Lingxiao College, or else she wouldn't have those scenes in her mind. However, she herself could not remember what had happened at that time, so how could she explain it clearly to these people? Moreover, there weren't many students who knew how to open the barrier. Her identity was even more suspicious. There was a deathly silence in the hall. It was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Even the breathing had become tense. Even Elder Wanzheng furrowed his brows tightly. Chu, what exactly is going on? Just tell me what you know. After all, she was his student. It would be a lie if he said that he didn't feel heartache for her and that he wasn't biased. Even now, this student seemed very suspicious, but he still wanted to believe in him. As long as you say it, Master will believe you. Chu Luiwei was stunned and looked up. Elder Wanjing sat on the chair with one hand on the armrest and the other in front of him, clenched into a fist. It could be seen how nervous and worried he was. However, even though there was some helplessness in his eyes when he looked at her, there was more gentleness and tolerance. Chu Luiwei felt warmth in his heart. Wanzheng, it's not important whether you believe him or not. Elder Guan He, who was silent for a while, opened his mouth again. I already said that there's something wrong with this kid. You don't believe me? If he is really an ordinary middle-stage 7th-level martial artist and an ordinary student, how could he do such things? Wanzheng, even if he is your disciple, you have to keep your eyes open. Elder Wanzheng clenched his fist even tighter, but he only looked at Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei understood that everyone was waiting for her explanation. She took a deep breath and opened her mouth. I taught him. Before she could say anything, Rong Xiu, who was beside her, spoke first. Chu Luiwei looked up in shock, only to see him standing with his hands behind his back. His expression was calm and at ease, and there was even a faint smile on his lips. Rong Xiu's words instantly caused a commotion in the hall. All the elders looked at each other, obviously shocked by his words. Elder Bo Yan's calm face finally showed a trace of shock and disbelief. Rong Xiu, what did you say? You said, you taught him? Facing everyone's questioning gazes, Rong Xiu nodded calmly. That's right. Wah! Rong Xiu's reply was just 2 words, but it was like a bowl of cold water being poured into a pot of oil. It instantly caused a huge uproar. Rong Xiu, what do you mean by that? Elder Guan He finally couldn't help but stand up and stare at the two of them. Rong Xiu didn't seem to realize how big of an impact his words had on everyone present. He smiled and said, I can open the school's enchantment. This point, all the elders should know, right? I taught her so she can naturally open it. What's so strange about that? What's so strange about that? Of course, everything was strange. Rong Xiu was definitely one of the best in the school. He was indeed able to open the enchantment a few years ago, but this wasn't the crux of the problem. Guan He, sit down first. Don't be so agitated. Elder Bo Yan raised his hand. Elder Guan He could only sit down angrily and look deeply at the two of them. He wanted to see what the two of them could say. Rong Xiu. Elder Bo Yan was the person with the highest status here. It was indeed the most appropriate for him to ask. You being able to open the enchantment is your business. But the crux of the matter is, why did you teach Chuyu? What's your relationship? And when did you teach him? He paused. This time, you've only returned to the school for about a month. Not long after you came, you left with Elder Shu Feng and the others. Logically speaking, you and Chu shouldn't have any interactions, right? Other than the day at the beginning of the month when the two of them met, they didn't have any other opportunities to interact. Unless the two of them knew each other. Chuyu, we are indeed old acquaintances. Rong Xiu didn't deny it and gave a vague answer. Everyone was silent for a moment. Elder Bo Yan frowned. Why didn't you? Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly stopped. That day at the Eastern Emperor Bell Tower, Rong Xiu did look at Chuyu a few more times. At that time, he didn't take it to heart. After all, Chuyu was accepted as a disciple by Elder Wanzheng and was the focus of everyone's attention. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with Rong Xiu looking at him a few more times. But now that he thought about it, it turned out that they already knew each other. Before she came to the school, I taught her this. I thought she would need a long time to learn it, but I didn't expect her to understand it so quickly. As he spoke, Rong Xiu turned around and gave Chu Luiwei a praising smile. Well done. As expected of the girl he fell in love with. Mobile users, Please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1203. Chu Luiyue. If there weren't so many elders staring at her with their death stares, she would be much happier to hear this praise. She really didn't expect that Rong Xiu would actually take responsibility for this matter. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips as many thoughts flashed through her mind. Rong Xiu probably knew what was going on. He purposely said that to cover for her so that she could keep her secret. Did he already know that she was actually able to open the barrier? But why didn't he say anything before? In fact, Rong Xiu's attitude had always been like this when it came to matters of the academy. If she couldn't remember it herself, he wouldn't say anything. Thinking back to the conversation between the two of them on the night of the official admission, Chu Luiyue's heart moved slightly. She never doubted Rong Xiu's feelings for her, and she also knew that Rong Xiu must have his reasons for doing this. Even though she still didn't know what the reason behind it was. At this moment, Chu Luiyue didn't know that the moment she exchanged glances with Rong Xiu, in the eyes of everyone, was a strong evidence that the two of them already knew each other. When had Rong Xiu ever spoken to someone so gently? His personality was cold and aloof, and after stabilizing his position as the Holy Son for the past few years, his aura had grown stronger day by day. Now that he had returned, even many of the Academy's elders had to lower their heads and give him some face. It was only when he was talking to Chu Yu that his expression was calm and gentle, which was hard to see. Thinking back to when Chu Yu fainted, he immediately went forward and carried him back to his residence, and personally took care of him. Everyone's expression changed slightly. They didn't feel it before, but now that they thought about it, there were signs everywhere. Rong Xiu was someone who wouldn't even tolerate someone else's blood splashing on him, but he didn't hesitate to carry Chu Yu back. It would be strange if the two of them didn't know each other. Elder Bo Yen thought back to what happened before, and he already believed most of it. I see. But why haven't I heard you mention it before? She's always had a yearning for the academy and wanted to give it a try. If I reveal that we know each other in advance, I'm afraid it will be a lot more inconvenient. Rong Xiu explained. These words were tactful, but also arrogant. Lingxiao College was highly respected and had many strong students. Here, no matter what your background was, you would be weakened. What was more important was your own talent and strength. However, this did not mean that one's background was completely unaffected. If everyone knew that Chu Yu and Rong Xiu knew each other, and seemed to be quite close, then the attitude of the elders and students would be greatly different. With Rong Xiu's position in the academy, Chu Yu would definitely receive a lot of benefits. And this was what Rong Xiu meant by inconvenience. Everyone was speechless for a moment. They couldn't refute what Rong Xiu had said. So you're saying that you deliberately hid this relationship just to let Chu Yu cultivate in the academy? Although Elder Bo Yen said it as a question, he had already agreed with this statement. Rong Xiu nodded indifferently, paused for a moment, and then smiled. Her temper has always been like this, so we can only let her be. Although it sounded like a reprimand, who couldn't hear the indulgence and protectiveness in his words? Everyone could see that Rong Xiu was going to protect Chu Yu to the end. Everyone was silent for a moment, and then they exchanged glances. Who would have thought that this was the truth? With their relationship, it wasn't hard to explain why Chu Yu would suddenly appear beside Rong Xiu. That teleportation yuan instrument was probably given to him by Rong Xiu. Chu Yu, you took the risk to come out because you were worried about Rong Xiu? Elder Wan Jing interrupted and asked. It was a big taboo in the academy to barge out of the barrier, and this was the only reason that could absolve this kid. Chu Luiyue blinked and nodded. That's right. Rong Xiu, who was standing at the side, lowered his eyes slightly, hiding the smile that flashed across his eyes. Elder Wan Zheng heaved a sigh of relief and laughed. Look, this kid didn't do it on purpose. Isn't it all because he was worried about Rong Xiu? This kid is sincere, how can you blame him for everything, don't you think so? Elder Guan He snorted coldly, looking as if he couldn't bear to continue watching, but he didn't refute. He had also heard about how Chu Yu helped Rong Xiu block the critical blow, and no one could deny Chu Yu's sacrifice in this matter. Elder Bo Yen came back to his senses, shook his head, and said disapprovingly. Rong Xiu, even if you and Chu Yu are familiar with each other, you can't just casually teach him the method to open the Academy's barrier. This could be considered as one of the Academy's top secrets, and other than the elders in charge of guarding the barrier, almost no one else knew about it. The reason why Rong Xiu knew it was because back then, thinking about this, Elder Bo Yen quickly stopped his thoughts. Rong Xiu showed an apologetic expression. This is my fault for not thinking about it, and I'm willing to be punished. Punishment? How should he punish him? Rong Xiu and Chu Yu were both in the wrong, but the two of them also contributed greatly to protect the venerable artifact. It was really hard to judge. Rong Xiu, did you teach him anything else? Elder Bo Yen narrowed his eyes and asked. Rong Xiu shook his head. Nope. Elder Bo Yen sighed inwardly. She had even taught him about the barrier, so what did it matter if she taught him anything else? Sighed. Why were these kids so worrisome? That's good. In the future, you should pay more attention to such things. After all, I asked you to come back and help, and for that thing to come back, it was indeed hard on you. Make up for your mistakes, this time we'll let it go. Elder Bo Yen did not intend to punish Rong Xiu because of this, but he thought that the barrier really did need to be strengthened. Rong Xiu responded. Thank you, Elder. As for Chu Yu, Elder Bo Yen pondered for a moment and looked to the side. Wan Zheng, he's your disciple, what do you think? Elder Wan Zheng leaned on the chair, frowning as he fell into deep thought. His expression looked very conflicted. Actually, everyone could understand. Chu Yu was his disciple after much difficulty, and naturally his heart would ache. If the punishment was too heavy, how could he not feel heartache? But Chu Yu was too bold this time, and violated a few of the Academy's taboos. If he was not punished and warned, he might do it again in the future. Even more, other students would compete to imitate him. Then the entire Academy would be in a mess. Knowing that it was difficult for him to make this decision, everyone waited patiently. After a while, Elder Wanjing finally sighed and looked at Chu Liue. Chu Yu. Chu Liue's heart tightened. Student is here. Elder Wanjing paused before asking with difficulty. Is your talent as a Xian master higher than a celestial physician? Digression, everyone is too awesome. Last day, begging for monthly votes, the countdown to October has officially begun. If you want to vote, please verify as soon as possible. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1204. The expressions of everyone in the room changed after his words sounded. They used an extremely strange expression to look at Elder Wanzheng. What kind of **T question is this? We're asking you to consider how to punish him now. Who asked you to ask this? Cough. Elder Bo Yen coughed hard and gave him a look. Be careful. What are you doing? Elder Wanjing understood, but he didn't want to bother. His mind was filled with Rong Xiu's words just now. He taught him and then he learned it. To draw a Xian formation to open the Academy's barrier, one had to be at least a level 9 Xian master. Didn't this prove that Chu Yu was already a level 9 Xian master? He hadn't broken through to a level 9 celestial physician yet. How did he suddenly become a level 9 Xian master? What was this? Elder Wanjing had the illusion that he had nurtured his student so diligently, but in the end, he had raised him astray. For a moment, he even suspected that he had raised a disciple for the Xian masters. Kid, tell me quickly. Chu Liue, why was Master always able to find a blind spot? Elder Bo Yen finally couldn't help but speak. Wanjing, we're talking about how to deal with his problem now. You can ask about this later, don't. We've already asked. Let's listen to what the child has to say first. A voice filled with excitement was heard. But it wasn't Elder Wanjing who said this. Instead, Huafeng. Why are you joining in the fun? Elder Wanjing saw Elder Huafeng's shining eyes. How could he not guess what he was thinking? This is my disciple. Don't interfere. Elder Huafeng chuckled. He's your disciple now, but the Academy doesn't stipulate that a student can only have one master, right? Besides, weren't you the one who asked this question first? Can't we listen together? Why didn't he think of this just now? He was so focused on wondering how that kid opened the barrier that he actually forgot about this. He only came back to his senses when Wanjing asked that question. That's right. For this kid to be able to do this, didn't it prove that his talent as a Xian master was extraordinary? Why didn't he think of testing him when he took him in? If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have let Wanjing off so easily. Fortunately, it wasn't too late. It hadn't even been a month since he started school. There was still plenty of time in the future. The originally solemn atmosphere became somewhat subtle. Many Xian sect elders also looked at Chu Luiyue differently. Elder Wanjing also saw it. He had a headache. Chu Luiyue finally spoke when he began to think about how to dispel these people's thoughts that they shouldn't have. She shook her head and said seriously, the reason why this student was able to comprehend the Xian formation so quickly was all because of Senior Rong Xiu's good teachings and some luck. But in reality, this student's aptitude in this aspect is indeed average. Elder Wanjing heaved a sigh of relief. That's great. That's great. No matter how much credibility these words had, he would just take it as the truth. In any case, from these words, it could be seen that Chu Yu still wanted to follow him to practice celestial physician. That was enough. He was satisfied, but Elder Huafeng and the others weren't willing to give up so easily. Hee Chu Yu, don't be afraid. Our academy has always recruited the most outstanding students. The better the talent, the more diligent the cultivation, the better the treatment in the academy. You are only 16 years old now, but you can already comprehend the Xian formation to open the academy's barrier. It is truly rare. You said that you don't have any talent in this area? Do you believe it yourself? Elder Huafeng leaned leisurely on his chair, but his eyes were fixed on Chu Luiyue, as if he had already seen through her. When you entered the academy, you only took the celestial physician examination. It was only natural that you became Wanjing's disciple. It's fine if you want to cultivate celestial physician, but if you deliberately hide your talent in other aspects because of this, there's no need. You have to know that there are many people in this world who can't have all these cultivation talents at the same time. He looked at her with a burning gaze. Chu Yu, this is closely related to your future. You must think carefully. Wanjing wanted nothing more than to kick him. He was snatching a disciple right in front of him. Elder Huafeng automatically blocked Elder Wanjing's resentful gaze. Teske, it was fine if he didn't know before, but now that he knew, how could he let Wanjing take advantage of him alone? This time he had to fight for it. Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched, feeling a little troubled. She really didn't expect that she would attract so much trouble just because she was worried about Rong Xiu and rushed out on a whim. Elder Huafeng and the others were all top-notch experts and had sharp eyes. Even if she said that, they wouldn't believe her so easily. If it were anyone else, they would be very happy to encounter such a situation. However, Chu Luiyue had many concerns. It wasn't that she didn't want to learn from an expert like Elder Huafeng, but Dabao probably wouldn't agree. After all, she had been playing chess with Dabao for so long. In fact, she was cultivating as a Xian master. Moreover, her schedule was already full every day, so she really didn't have any extra time to deal with other things. After thinking for a while, she bowed solemnly to Elder Huafeng. Thank you for your kindness, Elder Huafeng, but this student's energy is limited. Elder Huafeng was stunned for a moment before falling into deep thought. That's true. A person's time and energy were limited, and being a Xian master and celestial physician required one to calm down and study carefully. If these two were to be done together, it might really be a little difficult. In that case, you still want to cultivate as a celestial physician? Elder Huafeng was rather disappointed. After all, this kid's talent as a Xian master was obvious to the naked eye. It would be a pity if he gave up just like that. Why don't you spare a few days every month to come to my place to read books, play chess, and study Xian formations? Elder Huafeng still didn't want to give up, so he took the initiative to compromise and looked at Chu Luiyue expectantly. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that it wasn't without reason that some people were often cheated. If he was in such a hurry, who else could persuade him? As expected, he hadn't suffered enough in the past. Huafeng, Since Chuyu has already said so, you should give up. No matter what, you have to respect the child's opinion, right? After confirming that his disciple wouldn't run away, Elder Wan Zheng was in a good mood. Can't you just let him refine pills properly? If he's dragged by you to learn Xian formations, and in the end he breaks the barriers all over the academy like before he could finish speaking, Elder Wan Zheng suddenly realized that he had misspoken and immediately stopped. Elder Hua Feng also felt a chill down his spine. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1205. The painful memories of the past appeared in front of his eyes, causing Elder Hua Feng's heart to tremble. He subconsciously raised his eyes and looked at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue blinked in confusion and smiled. Elder Hua Feng, what's wrong? When she smiled, her originally delicate and clean eyebrows instantly became lively. Her eyes were like stars, cunning and intelligent. Elder Hua Feng's head was aching. No, nothing. He took a deep breath. Well, since you want to specialize in celestial physician, then I'll listen to you. A trace of confusion flashed across Chu Luiyue's eyes. Just now, Elder Hua Feng looked like he was determined to get it. Why did his attitude suddenly change? Elder Wanjing didn't seem to have said anything, however. She instinctively felt that she shouldn't ask too much, so she bowed respectfully. Thank you, Elder Hua Feng. Sigh. Elder Hua Feng looked at her. He still felt a little unwilling in his heart, so he added hesitantly. If you want to learn Xian formations, you can come to this old man's place to take a look. Chu Luiyue's heart warmed slightly. She could tell that Elder Hua Feng really wanted to take her in as a disciple so as not to waste her talent in this area. It was indeed a rare blessing to be able to receive such love from him. This student will remember Elder's instructions. Elder Hua Feng looked at her again. He seemed to have thought of something and shook his head with a sigh. Chu Luiyue could clearly see that he wasn't looking at her. Instead, it was as if he was recalling someone through her. Hearing this, the other Xian masters and elders also stopped thinking. Elder Bo Yen rubbed his temples. He could now see that this Chu Yu was also a troublemaker. It was as if wherever he went, he would always stir up trouble. There was no time for peace. All right, let's leave this matter at that for now. Let's talk about the punishment when we come back. He looked around. The matter of the Venerable One Divine artifact was really an accident. We can't blame him, so let's not talk about it. However, it was a big mistake for Chu Yu to secretly cross the Academy's barrier. Even if he helped Rong Xiu and protected the Venerable One Divine artifact, it was not enough to make up for his crime. Moreover, this matter has already spread throughout the Academy, and the impact is extremely bad. He must be punished and warned as a warning others. After a moment of silence, an elder asked, in that case, how about we lock him up in Pengmin Mountain and let him reflect on his mistakes? Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. That's not good, right? He was locked up on the second day of school and was only released 10 days ago. If he's locked up again, it's somewhat inappropriate. Immediately, some elders objected. Chu Ya, of course. However, if the punishment was too heavy, Elder Wan Zheng would probably not bear it. What's more, the child didn't have any bad intentions. It was just a moment of impulse that led to the mistake. Locking him up in Pengmin Mountain is the most suitable choice at present. Anyway, he has already been there before. It doesn't matter if he goes again. As for the impact of being locked up continuously, he was locked up on the second day of school. Now that he did something like this, could it be worse? There were different opinions. Some agreed, some objected. Anyway, everyone had their own reasons. Among them, the one who objected the most was Elder Wan Zheng. What a joke! How could he go to Pengmin Mountain again and again? Moreover, his precious disciple was about to break through to the 9th grade celestial physician. If he had not been interrupted today, he would have been showing off the 9th grade pill everywhere. How could he be reduced to arguing with this group of people here? If he was locked up for a while, wouldn't it be delayed again? I don't agree. Elder Wan Zheng said angrily. Everyone looked at each other and fell into a stalemate. Wang Zheng was the most protective. If he was really determined to oppose, they could not force it. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly took a step forward. I am willing to go to Pengmin Mountain to be punished. The room suddenly fell silent. Elder Wang Zheng's face was filled with shock. Chu Yuyu, Master, this is my fault. I should bear the corresponding responsibility. If I hurt the harmony between you and the elders because of me, I will feel even more guilty. Chu Luiyue's tone was very sincere. Please let me go. Elder Wang Zheng reacted and was very touched. Even at this time, she still did not forget to think about me. This disciple, I did not take her in for nothing. Seeing his expression wavering, Chu Luiyue added another sentence. I promise that I will work hard in there and strive to break through as soon as possible. Maybe when I come out, I will have fulfilled your wish. His wish was, of course, to let her break through to the 9th grade celestial physician as soon as possible. Good child, Elder Wang Zheng was very comforted. You've suffered. In there, it was difficult to protect oneself. How could she have the extra energy to cultivate? These words were just to comfort him. However, it was very rare for his disciple to have such a heart. Chu Luiyue shook her head. I didn't suffer. Hearing this, Elder Wang Zheng's heart ached. Let's put those things aside. Take care of yourself first. Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. Thank you, Master. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. His thin lips curved slightly, and there was a hint of a smile on his noble and devilish face. It was really... Rong Xiu's residence was on a remote mountain in the martial artist area. At this time, many people had gathered outside the mountain, waiting with curiosity and doubt. In a short time, the things that happened outside had spread throughout the academy. Now, everyone knew that the new student, Chu Yu, who had been in the academy for less than a month, had secretly broken out of the academy's barrier and fought with Jin Lei and the others outside. Of course, the matter of the venerable divine artifact was kept a secret because of the elders' strict precautions. So until now, the students subconsciously thought that the artifact must have returned to the academy. They did not pay much attention to it. After all, this matter was too bizarre and coincidental. It sounded fake. Therefore, everyone gathered here at this time, wanting to know how the elders plan to deal with the aftermath. That Chu Yu is really bold. He actually sneaked out. There were so many people fighting. Wasn't he afraid of dying there? Sigh. Anyway, he came back alive. I heard that he even blocked a fatal blow for Senior Rong Xiu. Doesn't this mean that he is friends with Senior Rong Xiu in the future? Senior Rong Xiu is a big shot. Even without him, nothing would have happened. But sneaking out is a big taboo in the academy. The elders have already gathered over there. They should be discussing how to deal with him, right? I wonder if he will be expelled. No matter what, he is Elder Wang Zheng's disciple. As long as Elder Wang Zheng protects him, I think he will be punished at most. Everyone was discussing. Somewhere, Jianghu looked at the mountain peak and muttered with a complicated expression, Chu Yu. That Chu Yu, how did he get out? A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 1206. Yes, she didn't care how the elders punished Chu Yu in the end, nor did she care about the situation of the battle outside. There was only one point that she was concerned about. How did Chu Yu, a rank 7 warrior, get out? One had to know that Elder Bo Yen had specifically instructed them not to worry and to go back and wait peacefully. The academy elders would settle those matters. After that, they even strengthened the academy's barrier to prevent anyone from sneaking out. But under such circumstances, Chu Yu went out. And he even blocked a blow for Rong Xiu? From the beginning to the end, this matter was strange, and she couldn't help but be filled with suspicion. Maybe he sneaked out with one of the elders? Liang Xiaoxiao, who was standing at the side, said with some uncertainty. Jiang Jiwan's mouth twitched. Do you think that if he really did that, the elders wouldn't find out? Liang Xiaoxiao choked. Then what else can we do? He seems to be only at the middle of rank 7, right? Even if his actual combat strength is higher than his cultivation base, it can't be so exaggerated to be able to pass through the academy's barrier alone, right? That's something that even we can't do. Let alone him? Jianghu frowned. This was also the point that she found the strangest. The only possible explanation was that Chu Yu took advantage of the chaos to forcefully pass through the barrier. But for some reason, the elders didn't seem to have discovered him in time and brought him back. Normally, if anyone passed through the barrier without permission, it would immediately attract the attention of the guardian elders. But Chu Yu succeeded, and in that chaotic battle, he even helped Rong Xiu. It was a pity that she didn't see it with her own eyes. Forget it, there's no point in us thinking so much. If he really made a mistake, the elders will punish him. Liang Xiaoxiao didn't think that there was anything to be concerned about. What exactly is going on? Won't we know when Chu Yu's punishment is out? Jianghu could only nod. Everyone waited for a while more before they finally saw people walking out of the mountain peak. The elders are out. The crowd was in an uproar, and they all looked over with rapt attention. First, several elders walked out in a single file. After they walked out, they didn't stop and went their separate ways. Thus, everyone turned their attention to the person who came out from the back. When most of the elders had left, finally, a few special figures appeared. The person at the front was tall and slender, wearing a white brocade robe. Even though there was still some distance between them, it still couldn't hide her peerless beauty. It was Rong Xiu. Following closely behind him was a young man. Needless to say, that person was Chu Yu. The two of them walked out one after another. Beside him were Elder Wan Zheng and Elder Bo Yen. The other elders all left separately. Only these few people came out and stood still, as if they were talking about something. Jianghu stared at him. If it weren't for the fact that Rong Xiu's mountain was surrounded by an extremely complicated barrier that he had personally set up all year round, she would have gone forward to listen to what they were talking about. After a while, Elder Wan Zheng patted Chu Yu's shoulder and left with Elder Bo Yen and Elder Bo Yen. Now, only Rong Xiu and Chu Yu were left. The two of them stood facing each other. Even though the people waiting outside couldn't hear what they were talking about, they had to admit that when the two of them stood together, they were unexpectedly harmonious. The forest was lush, and the young master was like jade. Logically speaking, Chu Yu's appearance couldn't be compared to Rong Xiu's, but the aura around him was rare. This allowed him to stand in front of Rong Xiu without being at a disadvantage. Why did the elders leave? Don't they plan to punish Chu Yu? It shouldn't be. Even if Chu Yu had a meritorious performance this time, the elders have repeatedly ordered that he can't go out as he pleases. If he doesn't get punished in the end, wouldn't that be letting everyone do what they want? That's right. And why did senior brother Rong Xiu and Elder Bo Yen stand there and talk for so long? I don't know what they're talking about. Although everyone was filled with curiosity, they didn't dare to barge in and could only secretly guess. Let's go, I'll send you over. Rong Xiu raised his chin, and a hint of a smile flashed across his eyes. You should be tired of waiting. Chu Luiwei blinked and laughed. Senior brother Rong Xiu really knows my situation like the back of his hand. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Don't call me that. Chu Luiwei relied on the fact that he was much taller than him and could completely cover himself. He wasn't afraid of being seen by the people outside, so he became more and more presumptuous. I entered the school a few years later than you. Shouldn't I call you senior brother? Rong Xiu chuckled, took a step closer, lowered his voice, and teased, You have your own way of calling me, why do you have to be the same as others? Chu Luiwei glanced at him with a smile, then took the lead to turn around and said leisurely, Senior brother Rong Xiu, let's go quickly. I don't dare to take up too much of your time, or else I'll be criticized later. Rong Xiu strode forward with his long legs and caught up with him. I didn't know that after coming to Lingxiao College, you've become so timid. Chu Luiwei snorted lightly. How am I timid? I'm just speaking the truth. Let's not talk about other things just now, there are many people watching my every move. She curled the corners of her lips. Believe it or not, as long as I make the slightest mistake or show the slightest bit of offense to you, they will seize the opportunity to criticize me without restraint. For the next period of time, I still want to cultivate in peace in the school. In the hearts of those people, Rong Xiu was definitely not as simple as a powerful senior brother. His outstanding talent and strength had already become an existence that countless people looked up to and longed to catch up to. His name firmly occupied the Qingyun role and became the symbol of the strong. Chu Luiyue felt that it was better for her to be more honest. Rong Xiu suddenly laughed and slowly said, "That's right. So you want to quietly study and cultivate in the school? I really didn't see that." Chu Luiyue's face heated up slightly. There was no way to refute this. She had only been in the school for slightly more than 20 days, but she had already caused so much trouble. No matter who saw it, she was a person who didn't know her place. But Rong Xiu slightly dragged the end of his words and lowered his voice, as if he was whispering in her ear, "If you really want to offend me, I'm waiting for you." Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks and turned to look at him. No matter what his identity was, his thick skin and temperament had not changed at all. "Rong Xiu. Do you really think that I won't dare to do anything to you in front of those people?" Rong Xiu looked at her and suddenly smiled. He answered with great anticipation, "You're most welcome. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.